In recent years, women's football has experienced a significant rise in popularity and recognition. What was once a sport largely overshadowed by the men's game is now emerging as a powerful force in its own right. From the success of domestic leagues to the growing international competitions, it's clear to see that women's football is here to stay. With more and more girls and women taking up the sport and more people willing to watch the game, there's a sense of excitement and possibility for what the future holds. Today we'll take a look at the rise of women's football and how it all began. Growing popularity of women's football. The growing popularity of women's football can be attributed to various factors that have resulted in more opportunities and recognition for female players. One key factor in the rise of women's football is the increased visibility and media coverage. Broadcasting networks and media platforms have recognized the market potential and audience interest in women's football, leading to enhanced coverage of matches, tournaments, and player profiles. This increased exposure has allowed fans to connect with the sport and follow the journeys of their favorite female players, fostering a sense of loyalty and engagement. Also, the success of national teams in international competitions has played a crucial role in elevating the popularity of women's football. Spectator performances by teams like the United States, Germany, and Japan in major tournaments, such as the FIFA Women's World Cup and the Olympic Games, have captivated global audiences and garnered immense support. These achievements have showcased the talent and skill of female players and shattered stereotypes and biases surrounding women's involvement in sports. The growing recognition of women's football can also be traced to the efforts of football governing bodies, such as FIFA and national football associations. These organizations have made significant strides in promoting gender equality and investing in women's football development. Initiatives like FIFA's Women's Football Strategy and the establishment of dedicated women's football departments within associations have provided a framework for growth and progression. This commitment has translated into increased resources, funding, and opportunities for female players at various levels of the game. History and development of women's football. The history of women's football dates back to the late 19th century, when the sport began to gain traction among women in different parts of the world. However, the development of women's football faced numerous challenges and resistance due to societal norms and gender biases prevailing at the time. In the early 20th century, women's football gained popularity in countries like England, where matches attracted large crowds. However, opposition from football associations and authorities led to the banning of women's football in 1921 by the Football Association, FA, in England, citing concerns about the physical strain on female players. Despite these setbacks, women's football continued to thrive in other regions. Notably, the Dick Kerrs ladies team in England and the Hector Cazon team in Argentina drew massive crowds and showcased the skills and abilities of female players. Women's football also gained traction during World War II, when women filled in for male workers, including football players, and matches were organized to raise funds for various causes. In the latter half of the 20th century, women's football began to regain momentum and recognition. In 1971, the Women's FA WFA was formed in England, marking a significant step towards the official recognition and organization of women's football. The first Women's World Cup was held in 1991, further establishing women's football as a global sporting event. Since then, the development of women's football has seen significant progress. More countries have formed women's national teams, and domestic leagues and competitions have been established across continents. Increased investment and sponsorships have contributed to the professionalization of the sport, creating opportunities for female players to pursue football as a career. Challenges to the development of the game. Women's football faced significant challenges and resistance due to deep-rooted societal and cultural barriers. Traditional gender roles and expectations limited women's involvement in sports, including football. Stereotypes suggesting that football was a male-dominated and physically demanding sport created barriers to women's participation. In many societies, the notion of women engaging in competitive sports was met with skepticism and disapproval. Prevailing culture norms often restricted women's access to sporting facilities, coaching, and training opportunities. Women were expected to prioritize domestic responsibilities and conform to traditional gender roles, which hindered their ability to pursue football at a competitive level. During the early development of women's football, female players had a glaring lack of opportunities and resources. Football infrastructure predominantly catered to male athletes, including leagues, clubs, and training facilities. This limited access to proper training, quality coaching, and competitive environments for women pursuing football. Financial support and sponsorship for women's football were also scarce. Limited funding resulted in inadequate investment in women's teams, preventing them from reaching their full potential and hindering the growth of the sport. The lack of resources further perpetuated the notion that women's football was inferior and less deserving of attention and investment than men's. Women's football also encountered prejudices and discrimination that impeded its progress. The perception that women were physically inferior to men fueled misconceptions about their ability to compete at a high level in football. Stereotypes suggesting women lacked the strength, skill, and tactical understanding necessary for the sport undermined their participation. Institutional barriers such as discriminatory policies and rules further marginalized women's football. For example, the ban on women's football imposed by the English Football Association in 1921 reflected prevailing biases and limited opportunities for female players to showcase their abilities. Such discriminatory practices restricted the development of women's football and hindered its recognition as a legitimate sport. Additionally, societal prejudices often resulted in limited support and media coverage for women's football. The lack of visibility and acknowledgement maintained the notion that women's football was less significant and unworthy of attention. This contributed to a vicious cycle of limited opportunities, lack of recognition, and perpetual stereotypes surrounding women's involvement in the sport. The rise of women's football. Women's football has experienced a significant increase in visibility and exposure through broadcasting and media platforms. As the sport has gained popularity, broadcasters have recognized the growing interest in women's football and have dedicated more airtime to its coverage. Major sports networks and channels now regularly broadcast women's football matches, including domestic leagues, international tournaments, and high-profile competitions, such as the FIFA Women's World Cup and the UEFA Women's Champions League. This increased broadcasting has allowed fans around the world to watch and follow women's football, contributing to its rising popularity. The growth of social media has also played a crucial role in promoting women's football and expanding its reach. Platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube have become powerful tools for sharing news, highlights, and engaging content related to women's football. Players, clubs, and organizations have utilized social media to connect with fans, provide behind-the-scenes access, and showcase the talent and achievements of women's football. Social media platforms have created a direct line of communication between players and supporters, enabling fans to interact with their favorite athletes and contribute to the growth of the sport's online community. Media coverage has played a significant role in shaping public perception and generating interest in women's football. Media coverage has challenged stereotypes and prejudices surrounding women's involvement in the sport by showcasing female players' skill, athleticism, and competitiveness. In-depth analyses, interviews, and human interest stories have provided insights into women's football players' personal journeys and dedication, fostering admiration and respect among fans and the general public. Media coverage has also contributed to the growth of women's football fan bases, attracting both existing football enthusiasts and new audiences. Through comprehensive coverage and storytelling, media platforms have sparked interest in the sport, creating emotional connections with viewers and followers. As a result, attendance at women's football matches has increased, and fan engagement has grown significantly. Women's football's growing popularity and recognition is evident in the statistics and milestones achieved in recent years. The 2019 FIFA Women's World Cup saw a remarkable increase in viewership, with a combined 1.12 billion viewers tuning in to official broadcast coverage across all platforms, according to FIFA. This represented a doubling of the average number of viewers compared to the previous tournament. Similarly, the 2022 Women's Euro witnessed a surge in viewership, with 365 million people watching the tournament worldwide, as reported by UEFA. This figure represented a doubling of the viewership compared to the previous edition in 2017. The substantial increase in viewership demonstrates the rising popularity and appeal of women's football globally. The UEFA Women's Champions League match drew a record 91,648 spectators, and that can only improve. Tournaments like the Euros, World Cup, and UEFA Women's Champions League are getting more recognition and interest, and the upward visibility is set to continue. If you loved this, click on the card on the screen for even more interesting football content.